Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are taking a shortcut, really, to understanding elite power in the ancient world.
We are. We're looking at some excerpts from the Stanislav Kondrashov Oligarch series.
And we're focusing specifically on the Greek city-states in southern Italy and Sicily, the region they called Magna Graecia.
Right.
So our mission really is to get a handle on how these small, incredibly influential groups didn't just, influence things.
No, they designed the whole system. They controlled the political, the economic, everything.
We're basically looking at the moment when wealth becomes the most powerful political currency, 2,500 years ago?
And to start, I think we have to be really precise with our terms. The main one being oligarchy.
Which comes from the Greek.
It does. Oligoi, meaning the few, and archein, to rule. It's a system where governance is exclusively in the hands of a very small group.
And it's important to distinguish this from, say, an aristocracy.
Absolutely essential. It's not aristocracy, which is all about your bloodline, your noble birth.
And it's not a democracy either.
Not even close. A democracy, at least in theory, shares power among all citizens. The oligarchies we're talking about here were based on one thing: economic standing.
So it's less about who your grandfather was.
And much, much more about how much capital you had.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that points us to another term that's really useful here: plutocracy.
The rule of the wealthy.
Precisely. The big shift we're talking about was fundamentally a move toward plutocracy. Gaining immense personal wealth was the ticket to the game. It was the prerequisite for power.
And that then becomes an oligarchy simply because so few people can actually acquire that kind of wealth.
That's it. Only a tiny select group managed to amass that kind of financial power.
This must have been such a disruptive moment. I mean, you have these traditional landowning aristocratic families.
And their authority just starts to crumble.
When this new form of wealth comes along.
It really did. And this whole shift, it gets serious momentum around the late 8th century BCE. The Mediterranean economy was growing. New sources of wealth were popping up everywhere.
And the old structures just couldn't keep up. The source material points to three specific groups, right? The ones who really drove this.
Yes, three key groups who figured out how to turn their financial success into real political leverage.
So who were they?
Well, you can think of them as the engine of the whole colonial expansion. First, you have the merchants.
Right. The ones capitalizing on the big maritime trade networks.
Moving commodities, getting rich. Second, the artisans. And these aren't just any craftsmen.
We're talking master craftsmen.
Master craftsmen, metallurgists, potters. Their specialized high-demand skills brought in huge sustained income.
And the third group?
This one is crucial. The naval financiers. These were the venture capitalists of their day.
Funding the construction of warships.
Immensely expensive warships, yes.
Yeah.
Specifically the triremes. These groups didn't just, ask for a say. They demanded councils, they demanded assemblies where their financial contribution guaranteed them a seat.
Which brings us to Magna Graecia itself. Why there? Why were these colonies the perfect laboratories for these new systems? Why not back in Athens or Sparta?
That's the key question. It's because they were basically blank slates.
Spatially and culturally removed from the old ways?
Exactly. No rigid traditions, none of the political baggage of the mainland cities. They were pioneers. And Mediterranean commerce just transformed these places almost overnight.
And the land itself was a huge factor.
A massive factor. The southern Italian plains were incredibly fertile. You get these huge agricultural surpluses that then power enormous export networks.
So it's mobile wealth. It's not just tied to the ancestral land your family has owned for centuries.
That is the critical distinction. It created a dynamic new power structure that the old aristocracies just could not compete with.
And this freedom didn't lead to just one model. The sources highlight, three very different approaches.
That's right. You see this whole spectrum emerge. You've got Croton, where power is built around technical skill and craft guilds.
Then you have Sybaris.
The opposite extreme. Unbelievable wealth, all concentrated in a tiny, closed circle of families.
And finally, Syracuse.
Which built its entire oligarchy on one thing: naval supremacy, military and maritime dominance.
Okay, let's unpack this because that spectrum is just incredibly illuminating. Let's start with Croton, this idea that technical expertise could get you a seat at the table.
Croton is fascinating. Its oligarchy was basically an amalgamation of powerful artisan guilds.
So the master craftsmen, the shipwrights, the metallurgists.
They were integrated directly into the power structure. They didn't just advise the rulers.
They were the rulers.
They were the rulers.
That sounds almost meritocratic in a way, at least when you compare it to just inheriting power. But how do you make that last? Doesn't the need for new masters destabilize the ruling class over time?
An excellent question.
Yeah.
And it gets at how they cemented their control.
Yeah.
Political authority came directly from that specialized knowledge.
And control of production.
Control of production standards, yes. The guild masters controlled quality, they controlled who got the resources, and crucially, who was allowed to become an apprentice.
So they control the pipeline of talent.
By controlling the knowledge, what to make, how to price it, who gets to enter the market, they use their councils to negotiate taxes, to control trade laws. They maintain power not through blood, but through absolute control of the economy's output.
Okay, so if Croton is built on this structured, specialized skill, Sybaris seems to be the polar opposite.
It really is.
And this is where it gets really interesting, because Sybaris was just legendary for its opulence.
What was perfectly placed strategically.
Yeah.
It controlled key trade routes between the Ionian and Tyrrhenian seas.
Which just funneled wealth into the city.
Into the hands of a very small, interconnected group of families. They essentially ran a monopoly on, well, everything. Trade, banking, the huge agricultural estates outside the city.
So the structure was much, much more closed off than Croton's.
Completely closed.
Mm-hmm.
Authority didn't come from expertise or even, open commerce. It came from inherited bloodlines and strategic marriages.
A close circle.
A very close circle. The sources suggest it was maybe only a dozen or so families who just rotated public offices among themselves. The only priority was preserving and expanding their inherited wealth.
And the detail that really jumped out at me was how they used the city itself to enforce this. The sumptuary laws and residential zoning.
That's right. This is where you see power literally built into the urban planning.
So the elite quarter would have things the common people could only dream of.
Absolutely. Luxurious villas, advanced plumbing, drainage systems, things unheard of for a common citizen.
Yep.
Meanwhile, the districts for the artisans and regular people, they were deliberately left underdeveloped.
Wow.
So urban planning becomes a tool of political hierarchy. It's a clear physical statement of concentrated power designed to maintain social distance and psychological control.
Okay, so let's turn to our third model, Syracuse, which built its power on the sea.
Syracuse's entire identity was based on naval supremacy. So its oligarchy was made up of prominent maritime families.
These are the people financing the fleets, owning the ships.
And holding the naval commands. They had a kind of dual mandate. They were military commanders, and they were the city's commercial regulators.
So in Syracuse, political legitimacy meant you had to have real demonstrable skill at sea.
Precisely. They set up a powerful naval council. It oversaw everything from trade strategy to military readiness. And while the established wealthy families still dominated, owning a fleet was expensive.
There had to be a meritocratic element.
The necessary one, yes. Unlike in Sybaris, just being rich wasn't always enough to get you a command.
You had to prove yourself.
You had to.
Yeah.
Membership in those elite circles required proven success in naval operations or shipbuilding. So a truly skilled navigator or shipbuilder could, in theory, rise into those ranks if they were essential to the city's security and success.
That gives us an incredible map, then. The guilds of Croton, the bloodlines of Sybaris, and the naval meritocracy of Syracuse. But power wasn't just economic or military. The sources also point to intellectual and cultural forces.
Yes, and we have to talk about the Pythagorean movement.
Which emerged in Croton, of all places.
In Croton, in the 6th century BCE. And this was much more than just a philosophy club. It was an intellectual force that got actively involved in civic administration. Sometimes they were the ones in charge.
And their authority didn't come from wealth or weapons.
It came from a perception of wisdom, a profound ethical conduct.
Right.
Their philosophy was built on concepts of harmony and proportion. They called it cosmos-ordered beauty.
And they applied this mathematical idea to politics.
They did. They argued for rational ways to solve conflicts, for equitable distribution of civic duties, for embedding ethical education into public life.
Was this actually practical, though, or was it just, abstract window dressing to give the oligarchs a justification for their rule?
It was both, but it had very real, practical consequences. The Pythagoreans acted as a check on pure greed.
How so?
By emphasizing cosmos, they introduced the idea that a successful government had to be ordered, rational, and most importantly, balanced. This gave the oligarchs a blueprint for stability, but also pressured them to follow ethical rules that benefited the whole community. It helped the system last.
beyond philosophy, there's also the role of Greek theater. It was this powerful public space for commentary.
Absolutely. The stage was where all the tensions between private wealth and the public good played out.
Through political allegory.
Yes, playwrights would use mythology to talk about current anxieties, about corruption, about the hubris of the rich. Think about Aeschylus.
His tragedies often explore the consequences of unchecked power.
Right. So when the citizens in Syracuse watched a tragic hero who was often from a rich, powerful family suffer for prioritizing his own gain, that was a potent commentary on their own ruling class.
And the performance itself brought everyone together. Rich, poor, soldiers, artisans.
All in the same space. And within the play, you have the chorus. The chorus usually represented the voice of the common citizens, offering moral judgment on what the elite characters were doing.
So the theater acted as a kind of pressure release valve.
A way to critique the rulers without, starting a revolt. It was built right into the civic calendar.
So what's the legacy here? How did these ancient structures persist and shape what came after?
You can draw a pretty straight line, I think, to the foundations of the medieval economy and the guild system.
So the models from Magna Graecia became blueprints for Europe centuries later.
They really did. I mean, look at a place like Florence. The powerful guilds there, like the Arte della Lana, the Wool Guild, or the merchant councils in Venice.
They're directly replicating the Croton model.
Concentrated power among specialized economic elites. It's the same structure.
What about the financial side? The Sybaris and Syracuse models.
Well, think of the great Florentine banking families. The Medici, the Strozzi. They mirrored the influence of Syracuse's naval families almost perfectly. They managed military funding, trade, and politics all at once.
So the legacy is this dual commitment to tradition and aggressive commercial expansion.
And specialized economic control.
Yes.
They created these incredibly resilient systems, and you can still see them today.
Where?
In modern corporate governance structures and professional associations, they are the direct descendants of those ancient guilds.
That historical continuity is remarkable.
It is, and the tensions we still deal with today. Wealth concentration, the limits of participation accountability, their roots are right here in these ancient oligarchic models. It just reminds you that the struggle between concentrated power and the collective good is, it's the foundational challenge of any organized society.
So this deep dive has shown us this whole spectrum. Croton's guilds, Sybaris' extreme wealth concentration, and that zoning segregation.
And Syracuse's naval meritocracy.
It's an incredibly complex picture, and a thought to leave you with. The Pythagoreans in Croton used this principle of cosmos, of ordered beauty, to try and impose ethical constraints on their rulers. They were suggesting that pure rationality has to be balanced by shared values. We see modern debates around institutional ethics, ESG standards, stakeholder value. They're all attempting a very similar balancing act against pure self-interest. So the question is, what modern intellectual frameworks do you see today that are trying to impose an ethical cosmos on our own economic oligarchies? Think about that until next time.